Hello and welcome to Android Faithful, your weekly source of news, hardware, apps, discussion of lawsuits, discussion of abandoning the platform that we talk about every week. It's all happening this week. It's insane. I'm Ron Richards, and joining me, as always,
Huyen Dao.
And of course,
Vishal Rahman.
Welcome everybody to our 19th episode. It is November 14th. Android Faithful number 19, and we're super excited to welcome a very special guest this week, Mr. Janko Roettgers. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you all?
Good. Welcome to the show. Janko, you are of your newsletter called Lowpass, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yep. And what can you tell us about Lowpass? What can people get who subscribe?
It's a weekly newsletter that's all about sort of the intersection between technology and entertainment. So I write a lot about streaming. I write a lot about sort of the hardware that makes that possible in living room devices and so forth. I also write about AR and VR and all kind of the fun things. And yeah, it's a weekly newsletter. You can subscribe for free. There's a paid tier as well. Always appreciate people paying for it, but you can also get it for free.
Excellent. And of course, the reason why we had you join is because you caused quite a bit of a stir with an exclusive scoop last week as it relates to Amazon and Android. So we invited you on to talk about it. So it was pretty shocking. Vishal shared the news with us last week when it got posted that Amazon is ditching Android for Fire TVs and smart displays. So Janko, tell us what you reported about.
Yeah, so this has been a story that's been long in the making. I actually heard some rumors about that a couple of years ago, but I could never quite nail it down, and I wasn't sure if it was real. And stepping back, I mean, not everybody knows that. People who just casually use some Android device or some Amazon devices rather may not even realize that because it looks so different. But if you have a Fire TV or if you have an Echo Show or even a Fire tablet, all of those essentially ran Android under the hood, right? So they use Google's the open source components of Android, AOSP, build their own Fire OS on top of it, how they call it, but it's basically Android with a couple of changes and sort of a different skin on top. And that has been going on for a couple of years, or basically for a decade, I think, even at this point. So Fire TV, the first devices came out in 2014, which was the same year when Amazon tried to make a phone that didn't go so well. So they've been doing a lot of things in Android. And over the years, they had some issues with that, with Google and all those things. We might go into that a little bit. But essentially now they're looking to make a clean break from that. And next year, they're going to come out with the first Fire TV device that's going to run a completely new operating system. They're going to go for a flavor of Linux, where they're basically adapting Linux with their own changes again, ditching Android completely. The first Fire TV device, again, is coming out next year, as I reported last week. And now we're even getting word that some other stuff may have come out even sooner.
So, Janko, quick question. You reported on an internal development name for this OS. Do you know if this will be branded still as Fire OS or Fire TV, or do you know if that branding will change?
I honestly have no idea because we haven't heard anything official from Amazon about this, and I've asked them and they just didn't comment or didn't get back to me. So these internal project names, obviously, they don't usually get adopted. So the internal name is Vega at this point, Vega OS or Project Vega. Maybe they will still call it Fire OS and just say, oh, this is the new Fire OS. Who knows? They could maybe do a complete rebrand for that. I'm not entirely sure. But everything under the hood is basically changing.
And why do you think they're making those changes?
So I think there's two big reasons for that. One of them is, and I sort of mentioned that a little bit already, that over the years they had pretty dicey relationship with Google. So especially in the TV space, Amazon was sort of a latecomer. So they did have these Fire TV dongles and sticks and all that out like close to a decade ago, starting in 2014. And some of them did pretty well. But when other companies, when Roku and when Google and everybody was trying to make smart TVs or partner with smart TV makers, Amazon was really having a hard time. They announced a couple of partnerships, was all these brands you never had heard of, but they never could get any big brands on board. And so I did a lot of reporting about that over the years as well. And it turned out that Google was using their own sort of commitments and requirements that people have to sign in order to make Google devices, whether it's phones or Android devices rather, whether it's phones, whether it's TVs, whether it's anything else that's powered by Google's version of Android and has access to all the Google apps, you need to sign anti-fragmentation agreements and basically commit to Google that you will not use a forked version of Android on any of your other devices if you also want to run Google's version on any of whatever devices. And so that's a big issue, especially for some of these bigger companies that maybe make smart TVs, but then also make phones and sell maybe many millions more phones. And they really need Google for that, because if you have an Android phone without Google apps, it's basically worthless, right? Especially in Western markets. So Amazon was going to these companies and saying, we really want to make a smart TV and have it powered by Fire TV OS or Fire OS. And they were saying, well, we would love to do that too, but Google doesn't let us do it. And so for years that was blocked and was going back and forth, and even there was an antitrust issue or investigation in India at some point. And now it seems like just recently, just over the last, I think 2 years or so, these two parties may have come to an agreement, or did come to an agreement, where now you have Fire TVs from Hisense, from TCL. But this conflict goes back way longer, and I think that was one of the reasons that Amazon looked into maybe just moving away from Android, finding an alternative. So that was one big reason. But there's also technical reasons, like if you use somebody else's operating system and you have to always wait for them to release it, and then you have to customize it, you're kind of always behind the curve a little bit, right? So, and then the last thing is that some of these devices, like smart displays, don't actually need all the stuff that's in Android for mobile phones, right? So all these like modem code and whatnot, everything that's built for mobile devices essentially, and is part of Android, doesn't really make sense if you have a smart display that basically doesn't even run any apps but gets everything from the cloud.
Right. And you made that point too, that even Google had moved away from Android for things like the Nest Max and stuff like that, running Fuchsia and that sort of thing. But, a question that some folks were asking in the chat also, which question on my mind. So if they're going to make their own operating system, move away from Android, where are the apps going to come from?
That is a good question. I mean, so I think you have to look at it look at these different types of devices. So smart displays don't really run native apps, or don't really run many native apps. So mostly coming all from the cloud. So it's fairly easy for them to switch to something new. Yep. Smart TVs, again, there is apps on smart TVs, but I think, and Michal, you might know the exact number, or maybe you all know the exact number. I think Google at some point said that they have 5,000 apps in their app store for their TV. That is not a whole lot when you compare it to the millions and millions of apps that are there for phones, right? So getting a couple of key publishers on board to maybe support a new operating system, if you're going to ship tens of millions of devices, is not that hard of a stretch, because people make apps for Samsung TVs, maybe make apps for LG TVs, and they all run different operating systems. Right. So that is also a transition that shouldn't be that hard. The biggest thing, and the thing that I also honestly know the least about, is how is this going to play out for Fire tablets, because obviously they have the Amazon App Store on there. There's tons of Android apps on the Amazon App Store, games and whatnot, and people have very different expectations. If you have a tablet, you're going to download not just 5 apps, but maybe 50, and you have 50 people and they all download 50 different apps. So you have demand for thousands and thousands of apps. So how that's going to look like and what they're ultimately going to do there, I just don't know yet.
And have they you mentioned in your article though that they have been they're doing web forward apps and telling developers to work in React Native.
Yes. So that's basically the big change here. And my feedback I have gotten is that that's actually could help some developers, because especially when it comes to people who maybe it's not just about building phone apps, but really they target these smart TVs, and there is all these different platforms, and some are web-based, some are native, like Roku has their own thing, BrightScript or whatever it's called. All these things are different platforms. So having an environment like React Native where you can target multiple endpoints and then basically build a React Native app that's going to be on Android and one on iOS and then one on these new smart TVs possibly, with just small changes for those devices, that's going to make potentially the life for developers easier.
Well, Win, you're a resident developer. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of times, even on proper GSM contracted phones, a lot of publishers will find it easier just to write a mobile web app, and just load it up inside of a native shell. And in a lot of cases, that's totally fine, and that's all that they need. And so, as you said, Janko, like, this makes it a lot easier for them. And also, generally speaking, I think when you come at it on a web approach, you get a lot more of the form factor adaptability for free, because that's kind of just naturally a thing that happens on the web and mobile web, is that you just build in adaptive fluid layouts. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And, another thing about the Amazon store is that, without having the Google Play services, a lot of those apps get a little bit hamstrung. I mentioned a long time ago at one of my previous jobs, we stopped supporting the Amazon App Store just because the experience was worse, and it just caused us, extra resources to support it. So I think for Amazon, if they can move people in this direction and create like a viable, user friendly, user adequate enough experience, it makes a lot of sense. Because why would you continue to invest and wrestle with Google for an inherently bad experience, at least for the tablets, and at least for the tablets. And I think, as you said, smart displays just make so much more sense.
Yeah, I think, Janko, you brought up a good point about how Amazon is more likely to be able to achieve this shift, painlessly for users on the Fire TV side, because when it comes to the TV apps, there's not that many apps that users actually need. So, and what you really need to convince developers to develop and create apps for TV devices and just devices in general is volume. And Amazon has lots of that. They can probably guarantee that we're going to sell tens of millions of these devices, because they already do for their current models. The tablet side is a little different story. That might be a little tougher sell. And I know, like, it's I don't know exactly how popular it is, if it's actually a number that Amazon really cares about, but how many users actually buy these tablets and sideload Google apps and like whatever apps they want onto it. It must be enough for them to not actively try to block it, because they could have stopped sideloading years ago if they really wanted to, but they don't. It kind of feels like they know it's there and they just let it happen, because they know people will at least get into Amazon apps and still use those apps if they wanted to. I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on like that side of things, the tinkerer, the power user side.
It's kind of funny. Once my story was out, one of the first comments on almost every social platform was, "But what about sideloading? What about Kodi and all these things, right? That people do with their Fire TV sticks and whatnot, and then obviously on the tablets as well." And it's a good question, but I mean, obviously, I would imagine that Amazon doesn't care much either way, because yes, it helps them probably to sell some of these devices, but they're also not going to make any money if you sideload something on it. So them not stopping people doesn't mean that they necessarily condone it. I would imagine they just don't care that much about it.
I'm super curious what the long tail support for those existing devices will look like, right? So like, there's going to be a transition period where Amazon's going to be trying to roll this out, but then also supporting both. It's going to be messy and kludgy. But you mentioned, Janko, and that it looks like, you said this is going to start rolling out next year, but I think report as of today that Amazon is already starting to roll it out on some devices. I don't know if you saw this or what you make of this. Is this rollout actually the Project Vega that you were referring to, or is this something else? Or
I pretty much think that it is. I mean, so this story kind of caught me by surprise. The news itself didn't catch me by surprise. I did go out this weekend to buy an Echo Show 5. That tells you something a little bit about it. So
well, the news being that The Verge posted that the latest Echo Show 5 is running not Fire OS, but something listed as OS 1.1.
Right.
Yeah. So
I will write a little bit. I'm in the process of writing a little bit more about that for this week's newsletter, my newsletter. So if you want to get the full update, subscribe on Lowpass.cc. I mean, if you read those stories, and Dave Zatz was the first one who found it, he found some pretty good clues. It's not just the OS number, but it's also, if you look at the open source disclosures on Amazon's website, where they have to publish source code for open source apps and components and whatnot they're using. it looks very different. And once you start to look a little closer at that, you will notice even more differences. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And I'll give you credit, Janko, reading your article on Lowpass.cc, where people can go sign up for your newsletter, which is fantastic. Reading your article, I was impressed by, just the combination of, it seems as if you spoke to some people, but also looking at job listings and things like that as you piece things together in this age of clickbait and hot takes and reblogging and, Michelle, as you know, taking somebody else's tweet and turning an article around it. Like, I was really impressed. As someone who went to school for journalism, I'm really impressed to see, oh, wow, cool, we can talk to an actual journalist. So bravo.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where, again, I had heard about it a long time ago. I talked to a few folks, I think like in 2019 about it. And everybody was like, yeah, I heard some rumors, but I don't know if it's actually a real thing. But they might be thinking about this. And so I didn't know if it was actually happening. Or, I mean, companies explore all kinds of things. They start projects, they stop them, they kill stuff, right? And very recently, I suddenly heard something again, and I started to look into it again. And once you hear like one thing, and then you look around and you find another thing somewhere. I found a mention of the project name somewhere, I think, and then once I had the project name, suddenly all these job offers came and like filled in the blanks. So it's a fun puzzle piece sometimes, journalism.
Yeah. It's nice that it works out, right? For sure.
Yeah.
So, well, excellent. Well, Janko, I know you're short on time, and we want to thank you for making time out of your day to join us. Any other kind of any other notes on this Amazon story, or things to look out for, or things to look for in the future, aside from your analysis of the Show 5? Or do you want to plug anything else before we say goodbye?
No, I think, I mean, it is an interesting story. I'm also looking forward to seeing how that's actually going to play out, because you have to imagine, so if they rolled it out on a device where they don't need to have much input from developers, one of the things that was in the stories today was that there's no Netflix on that device, which tells you a little bit about that. Maybe it doesn't work with everything yet. But once they bring it even just to a TV or a Fire Stick or something next year, they need to tell developers about that beforehand. So right now, Amazon hasn't said anything yet, and I hope they would change that, but who knows? But I would imagine even months before they ship something, they have to tell developers about it, and they have to really tell the world what they're actually doing there. And that's going to be an interesting time for sure. So I'm looking forward to reading about it, looking forward to covering it, and it's going to be an interesting time next year.
Excellent. Well, we are all subscribed at Lowpass.cc, and we encourage everybody watching and listening to the show, go to Lowpass.cc, sign up for Janko's newsletter, get all the great content that you're putting out. And Janko, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
All right. Well, that is quite the news, guys, wasn't it? I did that Amazon thing was truly shocking, right?
It's a huge move. Huge move.
Well, that's not the only move going on in the world, right?
Yeah, they're not the only ones who are ditching support for Android. Another company that has long been saying that they're going to be ditching Android seems to finally be going through with it. Huawei is seemingly ditching Android app support with the next version of their operating system called Harmony OS Next. So for a bit of context, Huawei announced Harmony OS back in August of 2019. At the time, they said it was going to be their own operating system for not just their phones and tablets, but also smartwatches, TVs, and all their other IoT products. Now, the key difference, they said, between Harmony OS and Android was that Android uses a monolithic kernel. In other words, they use Linux. But Harmony OS is said to use a microkernel, kind of like Google's Fuchsia OS. And as its name implies, a microkernel is designed to be much smaller in the number of lines of code involved. And generally, they're designed such that any processes that need to be run are run in the user space as like normal processes, kind of like regular apps are. And the reason for this is to make things more secure and more resilient to things like driverless crashing. The downside is that this kind of design can be a little more complicated, as a lot of message passing isn't done in the kernel mode. So that's be like moving between the kernel mode and the user mode. And it's also the fact that if you're building something based off of Linux, that thing is decades old and it's very mature. So building something from scratch, a new operating system from scratch, takes quite a bit of work. And so when Huawei first released the Harmony OS 2.0 beta back in 2021, developers quickly found out that it was virtually identical to previous versions of EUMUI, which was Huawei's their name for their previous fork of Android. And in fact, that version of Harmony OS still supported Android's runtime and still supported installing Android APK files, in other words, Android apps. So a lot of people thought, does this mean that Harmony OS isn't actually its own operating system and it's just another skin on top of Android? Well, those claims are finally being put to rest, kind of, because earlier this year at the Huawei Developer Conference, Huawei said that their next version of Harmony OS Next, is completely dropping support for Android apps. You can't install Android APK files anymore. Instead, you got to install their own version of app install files called HAP, Harmony OS Ability Packages. We don't really know exactly what architectural changes they made under the hood and exactly how different it is from the previous version of Harmony OS, but the fact that you can't install Android apps at all is a big deal because it means that developers will have to port their apps to this new platform in order to support it. And there's a recent report on the South China Morning Post about how a lot of Chinese tech firms are scrambling to hire software developers so that they can port their apps to Huawei's new Harmony OS Next platform. And as for what implications this will have for the broader ecosystem, right now this is only being tested in China, and because Huawei still sells a boatload of products in China, and there's no doubt that they'll entice a lot of mainland Chinese developers to port their apps onto the platform. But as for whether other Chinese smartphone makers like Oppo, Vivo, etc., will embrace Harmony OS Next on their own smartphones, I think there'll be some challenges involved because they'd have to right now use either Huawei's high silicon chips, they have to create their own chips that support Harmony OS Next, or they have to wait for like Qualcomm or MediaTek to add support for the OS. And then another challenge is that Huawei would need to make a major push outside of China to first get market share on devices. They'd have to first like sell a whole bunch of Huawei devices running Harmony OS Next to get foreign developers interested in porting their apps to the platform. So I think there's no cause for immediate concern on like Google's end in terms of like what Harmony OS Next means for the future of Android. But the fact that another major player is abandoning Android is still something to keep an eye out on.
I mean, is this the next iteration of fragmentation, right? Like we're going to see, like now we're going to see OS fragmentation, and we're going to see like, multiple operating systems out there and developer, like it's bad enough between iOS and Android to now factor in whatever Amazon's doing and then whatever Huawei's doing. And then is Samsung going to, well, Samsung probably won't because they're getting, they're so in bed with Google, but like if another upstart gets the idea and go, wait a minute, do we really need Android? And is this also a condemnation or a statement on the tech debt, like the point Janko made in his article about Amazon, that Android over the past decade has built up? Like, is Android just too messy now?
This also actually is a potential threat to Apple because Apple sells a boatload of devices in China, and there's nothing really tying down users in China to a particular operating system or a platform. Like, they're much more likely, because everything is done through WeChat as a super app, it's a lot easier for users to switch between devices. So if Huawei goes its own way and, ships a whole bunch of devices with this new operating system, it could be a big threat to both Apple and Google in China. As for whether or not they'll take that threat outside of China, I think there's still a huge hurdle to be overcome because of the dominance of Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Yeah. So, well, this is actually an interesting segue to talk about the Google Play Store, right, Wen? Because some stuff happened there as well.
I mean, talking about ditching the artifice or the business side of Google. So I'll start with a more level-headed, communication of a recent post on November 9th from the Android developers Google blog. And this is more from more or less the Google Play team, which to be fair is very distinct from the Android engineering team. So before I go into that, so we talked a bit when the show first started about some kind of a lot of moves and a lot of programs and initiatives and extra requirements that Google Play is going to enact in order to basically ensure high quality apps on the Play Store. So as much as we love Android as an open platform, it has come to light in recent years about the cesspool of app farms, malware, and just bad software, bad actors on the Google Play Store. And it's an image that, of course, is very hard to shake, especially when in comparison to the competition who has their lovely walled garden. And so Google has really been making a push to show that they're working on increasing, security and quality. And, as a developer, a lot of that feels like, a lot of it feels kind of, reasonable. We talked about this in July, but So there's like a number of things in this blog post. So we'll talk about the verification requirements. We talked about this in July about how now, even if you're a little indie dev, you're going to need to get yourself a DUNS number, which is basically a business registration number, for instance, and you're going to have to verify information like your legal name and address, things like that.
Have either of you tried to ever get a DUNS number, by the way?
I did because iOS, actually for my iOS life, I needed it. So.
It is an enormous pain in the butt, and I'm actually in the process of just trying to update my address in our DUNS number, and it's nearly impossible. So whatever. So for those who don't know, DUNS is a Dun and Bradstreet, which I don't know why they do, but it's kind of like a external verification that the business is real, it's legit kind of verification thing, and it's kind of thing where if you are just kind of messing around, you're going to hit that. And then you're going to basically hit a wall because you're like, well, I'm not going to go through these hoops to do this, right? So it's a way to separate the real people from the I would say fake, but from the not as dedicated, I guess.
It feels a little bit like a trans for like credit system, like TransUnion Experian levels of usefulness versus pain in the assness. But I mean, like I said, as an iOS developer, I had to get one like years ago. So I had one 10 years ago, which means that if I ever wanted to update it, I probably would have to go through the same pain that Ron did. But I think we all kind of agreed that, okay, it's not as fun anymore. It feels less hobbyish or enthusiast friendly or light to get into. But okay, Android's a big platform now. It's the biggest mobile operating system in the world. Sure, we'll grow up and we'll be responsible. So part of this kind of update is that, okay, they're going to start, along with these requirements, they're going to start letting current developers pick what day by which you would like to, what deadline you want basically to get your information verified. If you don't pick a date, they're going to pick it for you. Feels like school. And there's like other things that are reasonable, sort of. They also announced that they're going to have increased investment in app review. And basically the global review teams will now be taking more time to assess apps and basically kind of determine whether an app is trying to provide a experience of quality to a user versus deceiving or defrauding them, or any kind of other nefarious purposes. Hot take on this: when I first read this, like, oh my god, app reviews will take forever now. And that was kind of one thing that, again, being an Android developer versus an iOS developer was really fun for years, because they have like a week-long review and approval process where we just push updates up to production, and things get pushed out in like a few hours.
I say that the second worst thing in app development in my experience after a DUNS number is dealing with an iOS app review, and God forbid it gets kicked back or there's any problems. It's like, oh, it's a nightmare. Like Google has been so much better through their tools, through their automated tools and things like that. And so I get why they would do this, but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. For sure.
Yeah, they did try to say, oh, we really don't anticipate any significant changes to the overall app review timelines. And I think they tried to say that they're going to focus on a smaller portion of apps where review is really important. For example, for apps designed for children, or that request certain device permissions, things that are really, very maybe personal identified information, or just very valuable information or permissions that an app is asking for. They're going to take a little bit deeper review. So if you're asking more of the user, or kind of a bigger risk to the user, the Google App Store will just make sure, give you an extra look down and make sure that you're not doing anything you're not supposed to, which, okay, fair enough. But I mean, promise that it's not going to take longer, but we'll see. And furthermore, a general, connecting users to great trustworthy apps, basically saying we're really committed to making sure that we only have as much high quality content / apps as possible, and also surfacing these high quality apps, high quality content, and also specifically surfacing local regional content so that they can connect users with what they really want, which is all fine and good. All right, here's the thing that really pissed me off. There is a new requirement for personal developer accounts. So any of you who do not have an active personal developer account, if you're creating a new app and you want to be able to publish that app to the general public, you will now need to basically have a closed test, which is basically a closed beta, where people specifically voluntarily join your beta program, usually with a sign up URL or by submitting your email, something like that. And you have to have, as a personal developer account, by the way, this is not organizations, this is personal developer account, you have to have a minimum of 20 testers opted in for a continuous 14 days before you can even push your app to production. So I told a bunch of my Android fam this, and I think the majority of people were like, this dumb. Like, this is real dumb. This is real stupid. And I don't know. So Ron, you are you have a side business, you have Scorbit.
Yep.
If you were starting Scorbit today, what would your reaction to this be?
Well, this is complicated. I mean, because I feel my point of view probably isn't great because we had 20 beta testers and we were testing, longer than 2 weeks before we launched, right? So like we had a pretty good network of people we trusted that we brought in, but it takes time and work to recruit those people. So it seems like the days of coding an app, running it through its paces and then putting it out there in a fast to market kind of method are over based on this, and if you're, I know a lot of my buddies have kids who like high school kids who in their basement tinkered away, tried to learn to do stuff and then published an app and felt like this like total sense of accomplishment. That's gone now. Right, because no indie dev or a kid in their basement are going to get 20 people for 2 weeks to go through a testing cycle.
So this is incredibly hostile to indie devs, and you're a company, right? Scorbit is a company. Yeah, this is for personal dev accounts. This makes no sense. Right. And so, and I think I one of the people that gave me feedback was a very good friend who has both been a QA tester and a professional senior dev, and she asked, in her kind way, asked, so is there a process to hook up, devs with a pool of testers, or is Google planning on just not having much in the way of indie devs? Well, if you thought that Google might be helping out with this, no. If you go to the support page, which Michelle linked when he covered this on his Twix account. If you go to the support page, basically they're like, hey, by the way, the most common way to recruit testers is to use your personal and professional networks. Reach out to your friends, your families, your colleagues, your classmates. Basically, just get anybody who knows you to beta test your app. So this is just the most ridiculous thing to me. I am really mad. And yes, this is basically, it's either in the best case, this is the most ineffective, performative requirement to get app quality up, because I'll tell you one thing, even if you have beta testers, you're lucky if you do get constructive, actionable feedback, from them. Like some people, I'm a beta tester on several apps and I'll own to it. I very, very rarely give feedback. I just give feedback when something terrible happens. And the idea from them is that, okay, well, and they say, what did they say? In the blog post, they said something like, well, we're trying to increase app quality, and quote, in fact, apps that use our testing tools have on average 3 times the amount of app installs and user engagement compared to those that don't. So that all sounds really well and good, but I call fucking bullshit on this. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I allowed to? That's my one F-bomb for the day.
There you go. We'll let it go.
So our good friend
I'm noting it down for the audio edit. There it is.
So our good friend Mateo suggested I say frolicking ferrets. So that's just a bunch of frolicking ferrets BS. And I say that because they present this with absolutely no correlation. And as someone who's worked at big companies, I strongly believe that if you're telling me that closed testing results in 3 times the app stalls and user engagement, that's probably because that company already has hundreds of thousands or millions of users. And yes, in that case, you do tend to start relying on closed testing because the amount of people that are using your app, you're going to have a bigger percent hit if something terrible happens, something cataclysmic happens. So of course, I would guess that apps that already have a significant user base probably do use closed testing and do have, so much more engagement in app installs. Again, this is probably mostly talking about big companies, not individual personal accounts. And and there's no sense in this article of accountability. Like, yes, I think I was reading through Michelle, and Michelle got a lot of really great comments. And one person was like, well, I'm just going to start up 20, fake Gmail accounts and 20 emulators, which sure, but if there is no accountability, then it's just performative. It's just a pain in the ass and just adding load to developers. As you said, Ron, closed testing, if you're actually trying to do it right, the way they want you to, and to identify users that would use your app and actually get good feedback, that takes effort. That takes communication, like triaging certain things,
coordination. And Lord knows, talking someone through someone who's never been a tester through getting in,
bugs. Yeah,
that's challenging in and of itself as well too. Michelle, you saw a ton of engagement on this post, right?
Yeah, something I wanted to bring up. Like I've been following, Google Play announcements and like regulation changes, their requirements changes for many, many years now, and generally, the kind of reaction I could divide into 2 categories. There's the kind of user who's always kind of vocally anti-Google, who's on Reddit's Android dev, who are like against anything, you know, Google does. I'm not saying they have valid reasons to do that, right? There's like a lot of things that change that, you know, you could say are not good for indie devs, and they constantly complain that, you know, Google is killing off indie app development. But I think this change is like the first time in a long time where I've seen like users who I don't normally see complain about Google Play policies start vocally complaining about it. Like I've gotten so much feedback from users, developers within companies, with outside of, you know, just doing it on their own, just complaining about this change. And it really does feel like a lot of users don't like this. A lot of developers.
I mean, I don't want to get to just reading other people's responses, but here they are, you know, like, you know, why Google hate developers so much.
That's the feeling.
That seems super annoying for young people, indie devs starting out. If this is real, new developers just won't release on Android.
Yes.
So now we have to generate 20 fake Google accounts, create 20 emulators, and have ChatGPT do write up for our testing process. Great, right? So pay $5 to Fiverr to get this requirement. Got it. Right?
Yeah, which basically means that this means nothing.
What if I don't know 20 testers, right? Like
exactly. It either is just a way to smack down indie devs, and they don't care about indie devs anymore. And not only that, but also if you're switching careers, I know a lot of people who went to, you know, boot camps and are trying to get into development. A great way to build your portfolio, even if you don't have professional experience, is to release your own damn app and show what you can do.
Yep.
And I mean, certainly you can still do it with a closed beta, but it's different. And now you have to put more effort. If someone's doing this as a side hustle, as, you know, changing jobs from a different career, they don't have that much time to arrange 20 testers. Like if it had been any other number, like 5, 3, 2.
So Huynh, I want to keep this constructive, right?
Okay.
So, you know, wave the magic wand. You are now in charge of the Google Play Store. What does support indie developers? Is it another tier of account that enables people to do it? Is it a like how can they achieve the goal that they're going for of making, you know, ensuring high quality apps on Google Play and safety, but also support indie developers and burgeoning beginning developers? How would you change this?
That's actually, Ron, that's a great question, because I'm a little stunned, because I have been in Google feedback sessions, and without saying anything that I'm not supposed to, they have a lot of great efforts to try to increase app quality through, number one, automated means. Like, you know, we talked about the SDK scanning, where, you know, they'll just check on what SDKs are using to make sure there's no malware. They, you know, will actually surface. So another, like, I think positive enforcement is better than negative enforcement. So we talked actually last year about if your app is well tuned to large screens, you get higher visibility, you get higher scores, you know, and they're talking about surfacing local content, regional content. I do think that there is something there to, you know, elevating high quality rather than, this is not even, you know, demoting bad quality. This is just, I would say things like that. And then also like, it could be something as like, you know, for a new dev, there's so many tools, like, you know, various different reports for accessibility, you know, reporting of ANRs, which is freezing of your screen, and all kinds of things that, you know, if anything, if track how much, like how quickly and how thoroughly someone responds to those reports, because all this is automated. So you can honestly see like what percentage of report a developer, addresses within a certain period of time. Give them a little bump, or at least don't block them, or don't prevent them from doing,
or some proactive kind of label that says this is not a, you know, like, you know, this doesn't qualify or whatever, or not to neg them, but to make it clear to the users what kind of app this is. I don't know, Michelle, what would you do, you know, being as close as you are to this stuff too?
Yeah, I think one thing that might be constructive would be to have like a different tier. So like if you're a student, right, and you have a student email address, perhaps when you sign up for Google Play, you can sign up for like an educational account that lets you, you know, publish something like a student project, right? Maybe you might have limited access to publishing it globally. You can only publish it within like one country, or maybe even one region in your state. Same thing for like local apps. Like I was like helping my uncle look for like prayer times in this one local mosque, and I realized that, wait, this mosque has an app? And I'm like, who would use this? Only people who live in the city of Houston or like the state of Texas might ever download this app. So maybe like allow these really, really tiny entities who would like have no way to get 20 beta testers to like limit their apps. Say like, okay, if you want full global availability, you have to have 20 beta testers. You have to have a DUNS number. You have to have all this. But like, if you're just publishing for a very small number of people, you're a student, you're a researcher in an academic institution, maybe there should be some kind of ways to get around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, for like verified students, Yeah.
Student access I think is great. I think honestly, I mean, if you're an indie developer, make them get the duns. That's fine. Right. I think
fine.
that still does it, but then have some sort of parameters around, like, I'm a sole proprietor, I'm an individual, like, give me 5 testers, but then you need a longer testing period, or you need to, some sort of barrier to entry. Like this just seems like they built the wall too high.
Yeah,
right? And you need a couple of other doors lowered to the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I will say, just personally speaking, the first thing that it was really funny, because in their support section about how do you find, testers, they mentioned, example, if you're trying to start a CrossFit app, go to your local gym and find people to test. Okay. Okay, so I'm right now fun employed, and my goal was to actually work on a fitness app. You know how hard it would be for me to find 20 testers? All of my fitness fam, not all of them, but a vast majority of my fitness fam are iOS developers.
Yeah.
So and my husband, I gave my husband this big grant. He also was very sad about this, and he said, you know what? Unironically, you should just write your fitness app in iOS. And that's kind of, I mean, there's already like a inclination to do iOS first in development circles. Like, it's just easier. You'll get more return. And at this point, you'll get less friction. So it just feels like a shooting of one's own foot for nothing, for no, I will freaking eat my hat if this actually has substantive, impact on indie personal account, developer account app quality, because there's no accountability. There's no, it's dumb.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, so I mean,
awful.
it's one thing to say that it's dumb and all the reasons why, but I think it is important, especially in case anybody at Google's listening, to say, hey, listen, there are alternatives. There are other ways to do this.
Yes.
There are other entities out there that we want to see being able to develop apps and promote and add to this platform that, honestly, after Amazon and Huawei, now is bleeding. It is losing. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it just seems like it's, but what could be interesting also is, I think some folks mentioned this in the comments on Michelle on your post on Twix, and also some folks are saying here in the chat thing, is, will we see the emergence of testing pools? Like,
yes.
is this a new potential business? Like, there you go. Someone looking for a business, something they want to do.
New business idea.
Build up a way to get Android testers, right? Like, that's actually, I mean, Wynn, maybe we should talk about that offline.
We should just do that.
That's actually really interesting.
It is, and I do think that it's actually fun and would be good. So that in and of itself is great for indie and starting out developers. I will say, from the Google perspective, though, unless they're actually following up and making sure that you aren't just, starting 20 accounts, that for them, this doesn't mean anything. They basically put out a requirement without any evidence or numbers that this will impact indie dev quality. But yes, otherwise, no, that's a great idea. Let's just
actually,
do that.
we should talk offline about that. Actually,
now
that I think about it, because it's actually not a bad idea at all. So, anyway, all right. Well, we're running super long as it is, and we're not even through the second news story. So it's just, but I know you can go on and on about this. But when, I think it's so respectful for you. I have so much respect for you as a developer to your first reaction is identifying the fact that oh wow, up and coming developers and indie devs, this is bad for them, and and hopefully Google makes a change or try to swap it around. So, wow. All right. Already, there's a lot we've talked about already.
Ferrets.
We're
I know.
40 minutes into the show. All right. Well, so real quickly, get through the rest of the news here. It's been a while since we talked about messaging and RCS and things like that. But it looks like Google, in their effort to try to get Apple to open up iMessage, now is turning to what is sometimes a foe, sometimes a friend, the EU. Google is making a complaint to the EU under the Digital Markets app. They co-signed a letter that argues that iMessage should be designated a core platform service under the EU's Digital Markets Act, which would then make it be interoperable with other messaging services, which, I mean, this could be seen as a loophole, but I mean, there's enough people with iPhones and on iOS devices around the world that are using iMessage where messaging is a core functionality and therefore should be interoperable. This is exactly what they're talking about. And I was going to use this later in the show, but we do have a quote, and I'm excited to share this with everybody as we have a special guest, Mr. Hiroshi Lockheimer from Google, who said that Apple's iMessage lock-in is a documented strategy that he posted on Twitter last year. He said, using peer pressure and bullying as a way to sell products is disingenuous for a company that has humanity and equity as a core part of its marketing. The standards exist today to fix this. So that was Hiroshi last year on the topic, and thanks to Burke, to our good friend Burke and Victor back at our old friends Twit for providing Hiroshi's talking head. So if you're watching the video, hopefully you enjoyed that. If you're listening to the audio, go back and watch the video. You'll get a laugh. We're going to hear from Hiroshi later on in the show too. But so I don't know what, Michelle, what do you think? Is this a fair tactic, or is this them trying to manipulate the EU to doing what they want?
I mean, it's absolutely in Google's best interest to pursue this route, because really, what, besides marketing campaigns, throwing money and trying to convince people to, put pressure on Apple to open up iMessage, the only one that can really do it right now is regulators in Europe, and they're the ones who seem keen on actually doing it. They are the ones who wrote the Digital Markets Act, which is really forcing Apple to do things they do not want to do, like enabling side loading. The EU is also the one who forced Apple to add a USB-C port. The EU is really pushed a lot of meaningful change on Apple that they don't want to do.
The EU gets shit done. Say what you will with the EU, whether you agree with it or not. The EU definitely does make change happen for better or for worse. So good for them. While we're on this topic, though, our good friends over at Nothing announced that they're bringing iMessage to the Nothing phone. Which may make you say, huh? How do they do that? But Nothing announced that Nothing Chats, their messaging app, will let owners of the Nothing Phone 2 send iMessages to iPhones. And basically what they're doing is they're building, they're leveraging the architecture known as Sunbird to enable this to happen, which it's basically doing similar to Beeper, similar to other solutions that we've seen by this, routing your messages to a server farm of Mac Minis that are then routing your messages via their platform. So it's not like iMessage is now compatible on Android or working on the Nothing Phone only. They're taking the same tactic that we've seen other iMessage kind of circumventing tools have been taking, but doing it in an adaptive on the OS, supported by the manufacturer kind of manner, which is a good way to try to reach out to people. So good on Nothing for trying to bridge this gap as well too. So
that, by the way, a farm of Mac Minis to make this happen is brilliant, low tech, low rent, and awesome. But it's also ridiculous and crazy. Very Nothing.
Yeah, and also, unfortunately, in order for this to even work, you have to sign into your iCloud account. You have to give them access to your iCloud account. So it's kind of it's something I would not do personally if I had an iCloud account with a lot of stuff on it. Fortunately, I don't, so I could just create a burner account and let them have it and just use that for iMessage. But if you have a lot of stuff, I would, consider maybe not doing it, because Sunbird is...
Well,
messages are end-to-end encrypted, and they promise they're not using your data for anything. But still, is it a risk that you really want to take?
Hang on, Michelle, you froze up there. Can you repeat that?
Oh yeah, sorry. So in order for this to work, you have to sign into your iCloud account so that the Mac Mini and the server farm can actually leverage iMessage on the platform using your iCloud credentials. Right. And so if you have a lot of data stored in your iCloud account, all your purchases, your email, your data backups, your passwords, whatever, maybe you might want to reconsider using this if you have a lot of details. I can't guarantee that it's perfectly safe. Of course, Nothing is a reputable company.
No.
Sunbird is a startup. We don't really know that much technical details about how their architecture works and how secure it really is. They're going to say it's secure, of course, but it's a thing to consider.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I have an iCloud account that I never use, right? I have no, I have it because I have a Mac and I don't use it at all. So I have no exposure there. So your mileage may vary. If you have a lot of stuff there, you may not want you want to be careful about how you're doing that, handling that connection. And I guess we'll see more testing and stuff like that will come with this as we look into what they're doing. But real quickly, speaking of nothing, they also announced their Black Friday event is coming starting November 17th. It's that time of year, everybody. This Friday, in fact, they're going to be offering their biggest deal, their first ever Black Friday event. Running from November 17th to November 27th, getting huge savings on that. And basically, also, if you had purchased the Ear 2 or the Phone 2, anybody who purchases that at full price will get a partial reimbursement once the sale begins. So they're doing kind of retroactive sales, which is kind of crazy, which is nice to see. But they're not the only ones out there. Google also announced their Black Friday deal start in one day. Actually, their start on November 16th, one day ahead of nothing. So you've been on the fence for getting a Pixel 8 or a Pixel 8 Pro or Google Pixel Watch 2. They're all going to be on sale. Not super dramatically, but you can save $150 on the Pixel 8. You get the Pixel tablet for $100 off, $200 off the Pixel 8 Pro. So some deals to be had as Black Friday is looming. So if you're shopping for yourself or for loved ones, you might want to get in there and get on it. But this is just never ending. Oh my gosh. So there's even more news to be had, isn't there? So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we've talked about extensively last week, the Google v Epic trial or Epic v Google trial is ongoing. And this week we have the big man himself, Sundar Pichai, take the stand, as well as Hiroshi Lockheimer. And, to be honest, if you really want to have the play-by-play of the exact details of things that were revealed, but they weren't supposed to be revealed, and so on and so forth, I highly recommend checking out Sean Hollister's play-by-play over at The Verge, because he talks about every single detail. He's actually at the trial covering it live. We plebes here are at home. We're only getting what's being said through a third party, but it is interesting to consider like what's really at stake here, because so let's take Google's side of the argument, for example, right? Like Epic is trying to basically show that Google is a monopolist. They're using their stranglehold on Android to illegally enforce a monopoly and cut out competition from app stores and other app makers and so on. But and they're digging through a lot of confidential communications at Google to relay that. Like a lot of things have been revealed about the specific revenue sharing agreements, the specific distribution terms, the specific like amount of money they're giving to Apple or to Samsung, etc. And Google's trying to basically say, we need to make money off of Android in order to justify the thousands of engineers that we employ to work on it. Because Android is open source, but if you don't have a single company working on it to ensure that the app ecosystem is consistent, there's a single app market, all the APIs and all the devices that are running based off of AOSP are compatible with one another, then you might have like the fragmentation that we all complain about would be way worse. Like way, way worse is Google's like main thrust of the argument. And they do kind of have a point there. If you if you talk about open source software and a lot, you might have seen that one XKCD comic where there's like a giant pillar and like it's all held up by software written by one guy in Nebraska. And imagine like if that one guy in Nebraska just stops developing that software, the entire infrastructure just crumbles. Right. So basically you have this giant company that's behind Android and making sure it is well tested. All the security bugs are patched out. They're working with carriers. They have this app distribution model. They have this the app store. They have all these tooling and all that stuff. Like what would Android look like if it wasn't led by Google and if it was led by a conglomerate of companies that all have competing interests? Like sure they could band together. Linux gets things done, but like there's a lot of operating systems that are based on Linux and they don't all have apps that are compatible with one another. So like what exactly would that look like? Would that be good for the consumer? That's kind of like the argument that like Google is pushing for, that what they're doing, them making money off of Google Play is necessary to fund the future of Android, and them losing access to that would be detrimental.
Yeah, and as evidenced, so going to The Verge and looking at Sean Hollister's kind of coverage, he does provide some great quotes from Mr. Friend of the Show, Hiroshi Lockheimer, who Hiroshi said on the stand, when you sideload, the user has to understand they're taking a risk.
Yeah.
We want users to understand that the apps they're about to sideload haven't gone through the same level of security checks as the apps we run through the Play Store. And so he was very, kind of pushing that message. He also, in a little bit of court theatrics, while on the stand, pulled out two phones. He pulled out the Samsung Z Flip and the Pixel Fold, and he was trying to use them as an example to show how Google is attempting to innovate on Android compared to Apple. So really interesting stuff, fascinating. We're watching this with bated breath. We're watching the antitrust case with bated breath. Google in the courtroom. It's got to be a tense time over in Mountain View.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, yeah. So all right, cool. Well, good thing that they're on top of it. All right, so that said, nearly an hour into the show, it's time to check in with the patrons. Right?
Yes, and every single week, every Monday, we put up 3 stories for our patron pick of the week, and we let our lovely patrons, like this week's patron shout out recipient Mark Biggie, vote on which story you want us to cover. And this was a banner week for Android Faithful because we had a tie.
We've never had a tie before, leading us to wonder, what do we do? So we're going to talk about them both, right?
Exactly. Got to be fair. So the one story that did lose out, unfortunately, is the end of the road for the original Samsung Fold. The OG Samsung Fold is basically past its prime. It hasn't shuffled off the coil, but it certainly won't be receiving any more security updates. But that received 12% of the vote. With the remaining 88%, we split between 2 stories. One, actually, I'll talk about first, because it's very relevant because it is something that came out of the Epic v. Google, and that is about Google offering Netflix a pretty sweet deal way back when. So way back before, when Google actually allowed alternate payment methods and systems in their playground in Google Play, Netflix was, I think, paying Google only 3% of its subscription revenue. Of course, things are a lot different now. And there was a video testimony from Netflix VP of Business Development, Paul Perryman, who kind of cataloged what happened from those, halcyon 3% subscription days to now, when you can't even manage your subscription or sign up for Netflix in app. You can still do it on your phone, but it kicks you out to a browser like a lot of different places. And again, that is because of the restriction on Google Play billing being more or less, it's kind of changing a little bit, but more or less, the way to go in terms of transactions on the Android system. So Perryman basically, testified that yes, there originally was 3%, but eventually Google did try to, did for some time basically ban all alternate forms of payment. And for a little while, Netflix was paying that 15% of in-app subscription cut to Google. And of course, Netflix being Netflix, and Netflix being everywhere on every single gaming device, on multiple media devices everywhere, they could afford to take their ball, go home and open their own ball store, which is what they did, and in an effort to keep all of that share. And I think even Perryman, testified that, if they had gone, global Google Play billing, like, they were kind of encouraged to, they would have lost $250 million a year on signups. So that's kind of why they just said, F it, I'll take my ball into my own ball store. But Google knew how valuable Netflix is. I mean, it's not really hard to see, right? So kind of again showing that yes, Google is just paying for their own bills and making things happen, but sometimes they give a discount depending on who you are, what you make, and how much they like you. Between the time when Netflix was going ahead and eating that 15% service fee to basically saying, never mind, we'll just kick the users out to a browser, Netflix was offered by Google a 10% discounted rate on the condition that Netflix have a, quote, full commitment to Google Play billing globally. And obviously, Netflix being who they were and us knowing how Google Play billing can be, that was less than desirable. They're going to take that $250 million and, inconvenience users just a little bit. But that was something that came out of the testimony and goes along with, again, this idea that Google is just trying to be relevant, be there, and get and play with all the big kids in an effort to kind of maintain their, monolithic Google Play billing efforts.
I don't know. I mean, like this got a lot of hay coming out of it because before this it was revealed that Spotify had a sweetheart deal of their own. I mean, this is just business development, right? Like I don't fault Google by doing this in any way, shape, or form. They see a hot app and a lot of like a market leader. Mm-hmm. And this was back in 2017, right? Which is like half a decade ago at this point. But it makes sense to be like, okay, great. We know that Apple's taking 30%. We're going to offer you 10%. Like we're trying to be competitive in that way. And good on Netflix for running the numbers and realizing that like, oh, actually they'll still lose money and it's not good for them. And nothing says you need to take the deal, but I don't fault anyone for offering the deal.
I don't feel struck like that this is evil by any means, but and to be fair to Google, and we covered this on the old show, there are ways of getting reduced discounts to like 10% now with their weird ecosystem flow chart of like, whether you're part of this program and whether you're a developer that has less than X million in sales. So again, it's just something that came out, and so we're seeing all the strings and all the business dealings, like you said, Ron.
Nothing better than a public trial to get stuff
to
out.
bring all that out stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to go into something a little more positive and less litigation-y, the other winner this week with the other 44% of the vote was a story about Gboard with a great new feature, which I actually tried out on my phone, because if you are a Gboard beta tester and you've kind of noticed that on phones, when you happen to turn your phone into landscape mode, maybe you're playing a game and you want to use the game in chat, you'll notice that a phone landscape keyboard is a thing of unbelievable inconvenience. It's usually this long, stretched out keyboard at the bottom, very hard to use. And it's been that way for a really long time. But if you're using the latest Gboard version 6.60, I think, what will happen now is that if you're on a phone and in landscape, rather than having that really stretched out, very inconvenient to use Gboard at the bottom, you'll now get the floating Gboard panel that you can move and, resize a little bit, I think. And there you go. So you don't have to you can kind of make typing a little bit more convenient. This is specifically for phone landscape. So on my Pixel Fold, if I, using Gboard beta, if I turn landscape, I do now instantly see as the phone starts to, rotate everything, the Gboard just pops up into a nice window and then kind of docks again when I turn back to portrait. If I'm on a tablet-sized landscape screen, like the inside of a Pixel Fold, it still does like the big, huge, like split keyboard thing. So for those of you who just need to use your phone in landscape mode, Gboard beta has got something good for you and hopefully saving you some stretching in your fingers. So.
My main question is, it's 2023. Why did it take this long?
That's a great, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I could have sworn they were testing this before. I could have sworn like I saw a flag for this like years ago, and I guess it's just now rolling out.
It is really weird how we had a really good tester on our team, Eric, who was always good at testing this stuff, and then not all PMs, but some PMs just like pushing that stuff back because it's just not important. Who's using the phone in landscape mode and typing? Somebody is.
In the chat, Cousin Ajah in the chat room recalls a keyboard app that I looked at years ago called Minium. That was like a very minimalist keyboard app that took up a lot less of the screen. I forget how Minium handled landscape though, but even though despite how it was, but yeah, I miss keyboard apps. I feel like Gboard came in and just killed that whole, like when you had a clever, like there were the keyboards that were like circles and like they're all different kind of takes on keyboards. Those are fun. So, and
that's an Android special, by the way, based on the IMM6 system. So
exactly. So go over to patreon.com/AndroidFaithful, sign up to be a Patreon patron to help support the show. We thank everybody, but we especially thank, as you mentioned, we want to thank Mark Biggie, this week's patron shout out. Thank you for supporting the show. We're starting at the beginning, the people who signed up first. So if you signed up back in the summer, you're going to get thanked first. If you're signing up this week, you have to wait a little bit, but we'll get to everybody. So thank you, Mark. So that's going to wrap up the news after an hour. So
you guys.
Let's get into hardware. And I got to say, I felt like on any other week, the Humane AI Pin was going to be the thing that we were talking about the most on the show. But I got to tell you, this was something that I was so excited about when I saw it come out because it's just bonkers. And I'm sure everyone's seen it at this point. But basically, a company called Humane, which is made up of former Apple employees and Apple designers, developed a device called the AI Pin, which is essentially a displayless smartphone that you wear on your chest, similar to a Star Trek communicator. This is the first step close to the Star Trek reality I want to live in. It costs $699. in addition to like a $24 a month subscription fee or like service fee through T-Mobile to service the device itself. And you clip the pin to your chest like the Star Trek communicator, and you can use it to take photos. There's a little camera on there. You could use a virtual assistant. You can use gestures and actually send messages and talk and things like that. And it's all done via this pin, which is mind-blowing because you're like, well, it doesn't have a display. What does it do? And I'm trying to find on our video show, I'm trying to show up an example of it. But essentially, what you do is it has a green laser. There you go. I found it. It has a green laser that when you hold your hand out in front of the display, it projects the display onto your hand that you can then interact with via a pinching. They don't like to call it pinching, though. They had a different term, but through a pinching mechanism. And there are all these different hand gestures that basically show how you get through the UI. And in the video show here, we're showing the example of someone changing the song that they're listening to. It connects to your headphones, wirelessly. You can talk to it. It's a way that you can handle through phone calls and things like that. It is just bananas and bonkers. And if it wasn't $700 and $25 a month, I'd be all over it. But it's a little expensive for my taste. When you take a picture, the little light goes on to show people that you're taking a picture because, we want to be respectful in that regard. But why are we talking about it here? Because when I saw this news came out, I was like, oh man, I want to talk about it on the show, but I'm not sure that we'll be able to. But lo and behold, as we found out, Marvin Bernal posted on Threads that Humane is looking for a senior software engineer for a job listing in San Francisco. And one of the job requirements or the description includes work alongside our system software team to tightly integrate and customize our usage of Android OS AOSP. So Humane is running Android, and therefore we can talk about it on the show.
All Android? Always has been.
I don't know. What do you guys think of the AI pin? Do you think that this is the future, or do you think it's no?
I think it is. I think we are moving in this direction, but we're way too early. We're way too early in the LLM phase to be able to have a device pinned to your chest and relying on the information that it gives you.
You got to start.
We already saw in their announcement it made two mistakes. Like they got the trajectory of the next, I think, solar or lunar eclipse wrong, and they also scanned some almonds. And they tried to tell you how many grams of protein is in it, and they estimated incorrectly. So it's already, you shouldn't be relying on the output of LLMs right now without at least verifying the output yourself. And to do that, you kind of need a smartphone. And another thing that I've always argued on the show in the past is that the way we're interacting with generative AI is through apps and services that we already use. This kind of relies on you just, talking to ChatGPT and kind of using whatever information it gives you. How is it interacting with your Google Calendar? What if you're using Outlook? What if you're using YouTube Music? What if you're using Gmail? What if you're using Uber? It's not really integrating with all these services. And because it's all auditory and a limited visual data set, right? There's a lot that you can't do right now with it. And I believe there's even a web interface that you have to access on your phone to get some information that can't be shown on this display, which kind of defeats the purpose of replacing your smartphone. Well,
yeah, you take pictures with the device, but then you need to go to the web to look at the pictures that you took with the device. I feel like if this was a complementary, similar to a wearable to a watch, if this was complementary to a smartphone, that it was a way for you to interact with your existing smartphone as an extension of it when you don't want to take out your phone, when you don't want to be in a situation, that sort of thing. So I agree with you. I think it's missing a piece of it. I think the AI thing is a little overblown. But I got to say, the green laser projection and the hand gestures, this is we joked about foldables 5-6 years ago about the idea of a display that will roll up and go in your pocket. And now here we are, they're real. So it's got to start somewhere, I say.
Yeah, I would like to see something more. I mean, maybe this is inherently inaccessible or bad for accessibility, but people with, mobility issues or with reduced vision are not going to have a good time with this, but maybe this is the start of something new. And again, I agree. I'm not going to buy it, but this might inspire or just lead the way to something that actually will change the way we interact with, information, data, and our technology. So who knows?
Got to start somewhere. That's what I say. Innovation's got to start somewhere. So bravo to them. And hey, it's running Android. So
absolutely.
All right. So moving on to some more realistic hardware.
Yeah. So, so for things that we actually have in this day and age, and that people do actually buy, we saw a little bit of a teaser, but now we've got a leaky peeky at the OnePlus Watch. We've got full 5K renders based off of images from a testing prototype of the OnePlus Watch 2, and we can tell a few new things about it. Number one, it's got a 1.43-inch AMOLED display. It's got a circular dial, metal chassis, and some buttons to the right. It will be rocking apparently the Snapdragon W5 Gen 1, and look pretty straight. And rumors are Wear OS 4, but that's what we got. They're very very high fidelity renders, and of course, even if it is based on an actual device testing prototypes, things might change between now and release, but you kind of have a decent look. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell maybe whether the bands will change, but right now we've got some very straightforward silicon straps in black and white.
I gotta say, as I've been trying to shop to find a new band for my Pixel Watch 2 that doesn't look awful, these look really nice. I'm intrigued by this for sure.
I'm all for straightforward silicon bands if I did wear wearables. But...
Yeah. Right now I got a new band. It's like a nylon Velcro, and I don't care that it doesn't look that good, but it's the most comfortable kind of band for me. So
nice.
I always
really
love it.
Yeah,
I can wear it all day to sleep and not feel like I got to readjust the size or anything.
Yeah. So cool. Well, it's good to see that OnePlus just continues to be topical, right? The OnePlus 12 is coming out soon. I'm seeing every article about the OnePlus Open saying it's the best foldable on the market and all that sort of stuff. Everybody seems to be loving it.
They're having a good year.
OnePlus is on a roll. And just to think that a year ago, we're like, what's up with OnePlus? Where
they
are they
settled
going?
and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially coming from their first gen watch. The OnePlus Watch was kind of derided at launch because it ran a proprietary RTOS and it did not do a lot of functionality. It didn't have a lot of apps. It was basically just a glorified sleep tracker and notification mirror. That, to put it generously, it was not very good.
Yeah.
But this one looks like it's gonna be a lot better. Hopefully.
So excited to see it. All right. So Michelle, what's going on with Samsung?
So Samsung, is getting on the generative AI train, and this week they detailed their Galaxy AI branding, which is set to debut in next year's Galaxy S24 series. They didn't say specifically Galaxy S24 series, but they said debuting next year, and we know what's coming next year. So this Galaxy AI comprises their comprehensive mobile AI experience, and it's going to be using their on-device AI that's both running on-device on Samsung devices and as well as cloud-based. And one feature they showed off in their announcement is a AI live translate call, which will be built into their proprietary dialer app. Samsung says that with this feature, that audio and text translations will appear in real time as you speak, and that the translations all happen on device. We've seen features like this before, but they've generally not been very good. They've been kind of slow. So I'm kind of interested in seeing if Samsung has nailed the performance, if this will really be real time or close to real time, because that's kind of the issue. Google has live caption for calls. Google also have live translate. They haven't married the two together yet to do live translate in calls. And in my experience, Google's live translate on their Pixel is kind of laggy. It takes a few seconds for it to actually catch up with what's being said. So if Samsung can nail this, then it'll be a really neat feature. But apart from the AI live translate, Samsung also showed off its own generative AI model called Gauss. And this generative AI model runs locally on device and is expected to be integrated onto the Galaxy S24 series. We don't know how many parameters it's going to be running, if it's going to be a thin version of this large language model, but they do say that it's going to be able to do things like generate, edit images, compose emails, summarize documents, and even operate as a coding assistant. So a lot of the things that we already see, Bard and ChatGPT do, Samsung says that they're bringing this on device in their next flagship device. And they also tease that it can enable smarter device controls when it's integrated into products. So maybe this will let you control things on device, with your Bixby smart devices, or even functionality on your Samsung device, various settings, things like that.
It's the kind of thing where this AI stuff is is like you got to be in the game, right?
Yeah.
Whether we like it or
Table
not.
stakes.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Which is, so I mean, at this point, Samsung is almost lagging behind Google in this regard. So like they're, obviously like they've got to catch up, with this. So we'll see, but not a surprise. All right. Well, lastly, a bit of sad news, because Mishal, I know you were really excited about this. In fact, you were back when we were predicting Google announcement stuff. You wanted this to be included in those announcements, if I remember correctly. But doesn't look like satellite phone connections are going to be a thing anytime soon, at least when it comes to Iridium and Qualcomm. So Qualcomm ended its partnership with the satellite communications company Iridium. Iridium said that, quote, the company successfully developed and demonstrated the technology, but smartphone makers, quote, have not included the technology in their devices, leading Qualcomm to end the agreement. So it's a real bummer if you were hoping for satellite technology to be in your phones. Mishal, do you think this means it will never happen, or is this just a bump in the road?
Hold up, there is a silver lining. If you read Qualcomm's statement to CNBC, they mentioned specifically that the reason why smartphone makers weren't interested in Qualcomm's solution was that it was proprietary, and that smartphone vendors are more interested in a standards-based solution. So it's kind of good news, actually, that smartphone makers didn't jump on board with the proprietary implementation. It kind of signals that they're all waiting for something to be standardized and released so that maybe all smartphone makers can interoperably communicate with satellites. So that there's not just one to many, like Apple solution is proprietary right now. And if they move to a standards-based solution, then all devices could communicate, send emergency SOS messages to satellites. And I don't know exactly what that'll look like, or what kind of hardware needs to be integrated into devices, or what exactly needs to be updated in Android to support that. But I always, applaud when a standard is implemented rather than something proprietary, because it means that more device makers can make use of it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point, and hopefully we'll see it sooner rather than later, because that's kind of like the next frontier, right? Like what is beyond, like let's go beyond the networks and the 5G and stuff like that. Go to satellite, and then let's see how we can leverage that. So cool. All right, well that's gonna wrap up hardware, and we got some app news to talk through before we get to your emails on this extra long version of Android Faithful. All right. First off is exciting news for foldable owners, right, Mishal?
Yeah. So before Android 14, apps weren't able to make use of both sides of a display on a foldable phone. Most foldables have two displays, but typically apps can only show their content on the inner or the outer display and not both. Well, in Android 14, there's actually an update to an API that makes it possible for apps to do just that. We kind of saw this already when Google rolled out the dual screen interpreter mode for the Pixel Fold with this Android 14 update. But what Google didn't say was that this actually makes use of an API that's available to all applications. So to take advantage of this, OEMs have to implement something called the Jetpack Window Manager extension module, and that this gives apps available access to additional displays on foldable devices. And then apps that use the Jetpack Window Manager library can take advantage of showing content on both displays. Right now, I tested the Pixel Fold and the Galaxy Z Fold 5 on Android 14, and both of them support this new rear and dual display mode. Hopefully, as other foldable devices get updates to Android 14, they also add support for this feature.
Well, if anything, and here we're looking at the photo on the Android Police article of being able to use the back camera as a selfie camera with using the front display as a viewfinder. Like I remember being at the OnePlus Open event, Mishal, and hearing like there was a very, very animated group of people who have been guests on the show discussing the fact that you can't open up the Fold, use that amazing Hasselblad camera as a selfie camera, and see what you're actually taking a picture of with the front one. So that's the killer app right there for this, right? So and of course it's Jetpack, right? So
yeah. I think when you're muted, but you're
sorry,
to say something about Jetpack.
No, well, actually, I'm friends with the gentleman who was actually cleaning up this API for public use. So he actually did mention he worked on the dual screen interpreter. He worked on the selfie camera demo for I/O. And I've been trying to get him on the show to talk about working on it. He's being a little shy. He's recovering from a medical procedure, so I told him I'd bug him in the new year. But he did say they had it for a while, but they were cleaning it up for the rest of us, unwashed developer masses to get their hands on it. So I'll try really hard to get him on the show to talk about it, because I'm excited. I have a lot of ideas. I won't be able to publish them to the Play Store, but I'll work on them still. Maybe do a closed beta.
With our new service, we'll get you the testers you need. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So
first customer.
All right. And so, Michelle, there's some more generative AI news, isn't there? You're like on the AI beat today, man.
Drink today.
Yeah.
So the Google Home app is getting a lot of generative AI features to help you create automations for managing your smart home. So some of these include, well, first, this is not AI related, but the Google Home app itself is getting expanded controls for devices like fans, so you can control their rotation and speed. You'll also be able to see more data from sensors in your home. This capability is coming to users soon in the public preview program for the app. What's more interesting is the script editor feature is adding a new help me script feature that uses generative AI to help you create automations. So say you want to create an automation when it's sunset, you want to turn on your lights and close the blinds. If you enter that prompt into the help me script feature, the tool will automatically generate a script that you can then customize and apply to your specific home. So this feature is available now for users who are in the app's public preview. I personally haven't really used a script editor yet. One of the things I want to do more is I have so many smart home devices at home and Google Home, and I want to make more use of it. And I feel like this will be a really helpful step forward, because figuring out the interface, having to set up routines and automations is kind of annoying. So just saying, I want to do this, make a script for me, and just apply it. That'd be really nice to do. There are a couple other things that are being added. The script editor now lets you use camera events like package delivered alerts as starters. You can also create custom notifications. Another thing that's being added in the Google Home app is you can have new starters and actions for household routines, so that you can build routines that start whenever someone is in a specific room. For example, every night at 10 p.m., you can have your blinds closed, the light gradually dim, humidifier set the humidity level, doors lock, and etc., all as part of one automation. And then lastly, the home panel feature that first debuted on Pixel phones with the June 2023 Pixel feature drop is now available for other devices running Android 14. So I checked, and it's already available on my OnePlus 11 and Nothing Phone 2. And if you're watching the video feed, you can see on the left what this home panel actually is. On the left, I have a OnePlus Open running Android 13, and that's using the old device controls interface. So it's kind of just like a bunch of tiles that are not really organized in any coherent way. There's just a bunch of tiles, and they all show the same on-off state or just a slider. But on the right, you have the new home panel activity, which shows you your favorites. It shows you a live feed of your doorbell. And it copies the same interface that you have in the Google Home app. So this new home panel interface is just much more, I guess, it's a lot better for managing your smart home devices. And it's accessed.
It's a lot more intuitive. It's a lot more.
Yeah, it's a lot more intuitive.
Yeah. It's a much needed update for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And this home panel feature is accessed by opening the device controls interface. So you tap the lock screen shortcut or the quick settings tile, and that's how you access this new home panel feature. The home panel interface.
All right. So if you are a Google homeowner, some cool stuff there for sure. All right. Well, that's all the stuff. We actually had to do some live cutting of stuff for time, so we might revisit some stuff next week. But we do want to make sure we hear from you, the audience. If you email us at contact@androidfaithful.com, we'd love to hear from you. We've been getting so many emails back from folks, which is awesome. So please keep them coming. And that's going to tee up our first email, which I think, Michelle, we're making you work tonight, Michelle. So there you go. So.
Yeah. So our first email comes from a person named Issai. We don't know where they're from, but they sent an email saying, "Hey, Android Faithful crew, been loving the show and decided to finally write in. How do y'all keep track of so many tabs open at once? I treat my browser as a queue for interesting links to look more into, but I can't imagine having more than 3 or 4 tabs open, including my search engine's homepage. As soon as I'm done with something, the tab either gets closed, or if necessary, I save the link to my notes before closing it. Would love to know more how you guys keep track of all those tabs. P.S. Shout out to Michelle. I always have a small laugh when it's Michelle's turn to share where to find them, and the answer is everywhere. That's true. I am everywhere." Thanks,
Michelle.
Isaiah, for sending an email.
So we've got more emails on this topic about browser tabs, and in fact, our next batch of emails go into it. But last week's episode kind of started the fire as we revisited the topic of how many tabs you have open on your device. But Michelle, again, you shared with folks how you manage it, right? So what was that?
I mean, I've been using Chrome's tab groups feature. So whenever I'm researching something, and I have a bunch of tabs open related to that research topic, I label it as a tab group, say, Android 14 lock screen API or whatever, right? I named that tab group as that, and I have it open. If I can get to it immediately and I write something on it, like and put notes on it, then I'll keep that tab group open. Otherwise, I'll use an extension called OneTab, and then I'll close that tab group. And the one cool thing that OneTab does is it actually preserves that tab group. So that tab group that I named and saved, it gets saved as its own category in OneTab. So whenever I want to revisit it, I just restore all the tabs, and it opens a new Chrome window with all those tabs and that tab group restored. So that's how I organize my tabs.
There's another application that I tinkered with a while back called Workona, Workona, which is a similar kind of tab management tool, basically tab manager and spaces, and it does work on Android as well. So you might want to look into Workona as well, in addition to OneTab. So cool one. But in terms of the tabs, this is the amusing
Tab
part
time.
of the show. So buckle up, because we got a bunch of emails on this topic. And again, refer to last week's episode where how did it all start up? It started out with no, actually 2 weeks ago, because 2 weeks ago we just to lay the background. We had Peter write in, who had written into our old show referencing the fact that he had a large number of tabs open on his phone on Chrome, and then that led to Brandon writing in last week, sharing the fact that he had 75 to 100 tabs open, and he was reacting to Peter. He said the guy who had 33 tabs open. Well, this week the responses flew in. First up, Linda wrote in and said, "I checked my Chrome tabs on my Pixel 7 Pro and was surprised by this, but 327 tabs." And Linda says, "Love the show. I haven't missed an episode." And she also sent in proof, a screenshot of her Chrome after she closed all 327 tabs. And I zoomed in for our video viewers so you can see proof of this. I think 327 tabs at the moment is the reigning champion. So congratulations, Linda. But Brandon couldn't help himself, and Brandon also wrote in, and he said, "Just over here, rolling on the floor laughing." He said, "My tab count is always the smiley face because I have too many. If I recall correctly, once you hit over 100, it becomes a smiley face. Although Linda showed 327, so I don't know if they kept the smiley face or not." He said, "Despite the tab count, I have them organized, okay, in my own chaotic way. Looking into OneTab now because I generally have them grouped together in a way that sounds like it will work in a similar way. Okay, I manually counted. I'm at 315. I may have a problem." So Brandon, 315 is good, but does not beat Linda's 327. So Brandon comes in second. But of course, not to be not heard, the original emailer, Peter, did write in to correct Brandon that he had 37 tabs open, not 33, but now he's down to 7. He said it was 6 until yesterday morning when he Googled synonyms for communication, which I found very funny. So, and that came in from Peter. So thank you, everybody, for writing with your tab counts. If you can beat 327 tabs without cheating, without doing it just to beat it, email us in and let us know. Send a screenshot. Open up your Chrome, see how many tabs you are without looking, without editing it.
I feel like we need a bumper for that, a special bumper for like tab count. Dun, dun, dun.
Tab count. So, all right, and we got one more email.
Yes, and I know I did a long rant earlier, and our good listener Kevin from Pittsburgh is vibing on me this week and has a little rant/vent of his own. So Kevin writes saying, "It seems like it's been a few weeks since you last got an email about Google support or lack thereof. So here's one for you. My Pixel 7 Pro recently started to develop some black spots on the screen. It was working fine, but was slightly annoying, so I decided to pay the $29 to have my screen repaired through Google Preferred Care. They had me go to my local You Break, I Fix location to get a new screen put on. Unfortunately, the repair shop not only couldn't get my new screen put on, but they completely broke the phone. Something about breaking off the connector for the ribbon cable that the screen attaches to. So not only do I not have a phone for a few days now, but now I also have to pay an additional $99 for a replacement device. I tried to explain to both Assurant and Google, including multiple supervisors, that I didn't want to pay an additional $99 to fix the problem that they caused, but I had absolutely no luck. It doesn't seem like the best way to treat a customer, especially one that has had almost every Nexus and Pixel device over the years. Sorry for the wall of text, but I needed someone to vent to. I can't help but imagine how differently this experience would have been if I had an iPhone instead. Thanks, Kevin from Pittsburgh.
That's just bad luck.
That's
That's
sucks,
super
dude.
frustrating.
I'm really sorry, dude.
Yeah. Sorry that happened. I don't know. There's no real like recourse there. It's you got a lot of cooks in that kitchen, right? Between the people who Google, the people who did the fixing and the breaking, and then Assurant and all that stuff. It's brutal.
It sounds more like that place should change its name from You Break, I Fix to You Break, I Break Too or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You break, we break worse and charge you money. Yeah.
It's terrible. So
No
sorry,
one
Kevin.
fix.
Yeah.
No
fix.
We break, no one fix. So I will say in terms of the topic of broken phones, my wife's iPhone screen cracked a little bit, so I'm going to attempt to take it to a Genius store and have Apple fix it and see how that goes. I've never done that before, so I'll be curious what it's like on the Apple side of things. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm glad that I've only had to go to a repair center once recently, and it was just for replacing the battery on a Pixel 4, and it was really quick. It took like an hour. Just went to You Break, I Fix, and they replaced it.
Wow, who knows? So, all right. Well, so email us in at contact@androidfaithful.com. We want to hear from you, whether it be your support woes or your tab count or whatever you got or any other kind of fun stuff. Love all the emails and the interaction we've been getting from the audience. You guys are awesome. All right. This show's running super long. Michelle, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me, as our dedicated reader Isaiah said, everywhere. I am on Twix, I am on Mastodon, I am on Telegram, I am on Threads, Reddit, Discord, WeChat, WhatsApp,
Weibo?
everywhere.
Are you on Weibo?
Not on Weibo yet. That app is infuriating to use. But if you want to support my work, you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Michal Rahman, where you can become a subscriber for $3 a month. And I post a lot on Twitter, on Twix, everywhere. Like I said, for free. A lot of detailed information takes hours to research. It does a lot of things that a lot of websites don't want to take because it's a lot of technical and a lot doesn't really apply to a lot of people. Just not a lot of ad revenue to get out of it. So if you want to support my work and see that work continue, please consider subscribing. And of course, subscribe to Android Faithful as well.
Yeah. An important question from the chat, Michelle, are you on OnlyFans?
Oh dear.
I mean, you could be.
No judgment. Just
no, yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to do spicy content on OnlyFans. It could be Android content. I just don't know how much engagement you'll get. So.
Could be like a burgeoning section on OnlyFans.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see how the tech sector is on there.
Android nerds gone wild.
Android nerds gone wild.
That's a show title.
All right, Win, where can folks find you?
Well, I am an Android nerd, an Android developer, who hopefully one day will put out an app of her own. And you can find talks that I do about Android development on my website, randomlytyping.com. And you can find me most places at Queen Code Monkey and in the Fediverse at Queen Code Monkey at mastodon.social. And you are not going to see me for 2 weeks because I'm going on vacation in Japan, where maybe I'll use the dual screen interpreter, even though I kind of speak a little bit of Japanese. I kind of want to practice it a bit, but I'll be missing you guys for the next 2 weeks, both you, Michelle, and Ron, and our lovely Android faithful. But maybe the show time is 10 a.m. Japanese Standard Time, so maybe I'll just be regular audience member Win if we're not doing anything.
Just be on vacation.
I know. Don't want to miss some of our guests. I might just listen.
We appreciate you. That's awesome. We're excited for your vacation. It's going to be good. We'll miss you, but we got a couple of good shows lined up that you're going to have to watch as a regular viewer, Winter Dow, as opposed to co-host. So, awesome. And finally, while I am as everywhere as Michelle is, I'm not as active as Michelle is, but I'm Ron XO out there on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, Mastodon, Blue Sky, everything. I'm most active on Instagram. But if you're looking for something else to listen to, head over to my other podcast over at ifanboy.com, where we did our monthly media conversation. And I talked about, watched a movie recently, Flora and Son on Apple TV Plus. That was very good. I've been watching The Gold on Paramount Plus. But then we went into a little bit of we did a end of the year mailbag with some more emails from our listeners and talked a lot about some holiday movies and and specials and stuff like that as the holidays are coming up, and that's our favorite time to watch TV. So go to ifanboy.com. You can check all that out, and subscribe and listen to that show if you like comic books and movies and TVs and stuff. And then lastly, head over to androidfaithful.com, our very own website, where you can subscribe to the show on every imaginable podcast app that's out there. You can find links to link over to our Patreon, link over to our socials, follow us on Instagram, Twitter /X, Mastodon, Threads, Facebook. And you can find links to our individual episodes, which all have the video. So if you're an audio listener and you want to watch the video, you go to androidfaithful.com. You can watch the video replay. It's always fun to watch because we want to give you every imaginable option out there to enjoy Android Faithful, because we do record the show, as our live listeners, our live viewers can attest, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, over on youtube.com/Daily Tech News Show or twitch.tv/Good Day Internet. The podcast itself comes out every Tuesday night on the RSS feeds. And we want to thank everybody for listening, watching, subscribing, because you're the best, because collectively we all are the Android Faithful. Have a great week. See you next time.